When planning the road to success, there are a few steps to keep in mind. Identifying and solving the cause, facing and embracing change, goal setting, and being accountable. We'll talk about this today on Sustainable Success with Chris Salem. New and healthier habits lead to prosperity in all areas of your life and business. Now, here's your host, Chris Salem.
Welcome to Sustainable Success. My name is Chris Salem, your host. We want to welcome you here. If it's your first time here, you found us here at the new platform now that we're here with Libsyn. Again, Voice America Business Channel now hosts on the Libsyn platform after we've spent almost 8 years now. It's hard to believe that in next month, we will be celebrating 8 years on the air here with Voice America. Starting off when we started off with the Influencer channel that we pioneered back in May of 2017. And now we've been with the business channel now for the last 4 or 5 years now. And we are excited to have you here. And again, listeners that have been with us since the beginning, we want to always cherish you and respect you for being here. The show would not be what it is today without you. And again, we thank you for all the help that you've helped in sharing the show to help others as we bring in subject matter guests to help elevate your business and individual efforts to the next level. Today's show is being brought to you today by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a new social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. Now, it is a membership program, taking out all the noise out of social media. You get to generate genuine and authentic relationships with the people you choose to interact with. And if you would like to get some more information about Alumni Direct, you can check them out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. And again, we want to make sure that everybody that is new to the show, you can follow us also on Spotify as well as Apple. We also have our YouTube channel and our Facebook page at Sustainable Success 2017. Make sure to follow us there, where you can get this great information from our subject matter experts each and every week, as we never missed a week, except if it happens to fall on a holiday. That would be the only time, and that's far and few between. And we got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about mastering executive transitions. We are going to be with Navid Nazemian. He's an executive transition coach. He helps executives and their leadership teams accelerate and successfully transition into new roles. He's the author of Mastering Executive Transitions, the Definitive Guide, a #1 new release and international best-selling book. Navid is an unparalleled expert and thought leader in executive transitions, having lived successfully, worked in 5 countries across 6 sectors, and working with C-level leaders in the same as an executive transition coach. He brings to the table an eclectic background that spans over 2 decades of human resource experience in some of the world's most admired companies, both on a country, regional, and global leadership level in both emerging and developed markets. More recently, Navid has been recognized as HR's most influential practitioner by HR Magazine, ranked as #1 coach globally by CEO Today for the 3rd year running, and 100 most iconic coaching leaders by CHRO Asia, and has received the Outstanding Leadership Award from Education 2.0. And without further ado, we welcome Navid Nazemian to the show. Navid, how you doing today?
Hey, Chris, I am doing great. And thank you so much for this kind introduction. This has to feature as the best introduction ever I've had, with all the accolades and all the bells and whistles. So I am super stoked to have this conversation with you today and to add value to your listeners.
We are a pleasure to have you. If you can just give us a background. We love to always start off with a background with our guests. When it comes to transitions, there are so many things now going on in the world where transitions are going to happen inevitably. Whether if we're making that change or making that decision to change or not, it's going to happen. Can you share with us a little bit about the background that led you down this path and helping executives, with these transitions, which is really more important than ever, especially if they're going to be probably going into even a different industry if that's the case?
Sure. So first off, allow me by saying that despite the fact that I have had the good fortune and pleasure to work for some of the world's most admired companies, And I did that most of the time in the HR department. The reality is that none of these companies get this particular process perfect, which is one of the reasons I really embarked on this journey to say, hey, is there a better way to go about this? Surely there must be a ton of material out there. And of course, when I started to do my research, and I digged and I digged and I digged. And at the time, there was no ChatGPT or none of the AI tools available to us. All I could find was the first 90 days, which was quite honestly a little underwhelming because, the subtitle of the same book suggests it speaks about critical onboarding strategies for leaders at all levels, which you and I know best, Chris. If something is written for any leader at any level, it won't be fit for purpose for the top of the house. And so that's kind of led me down to this, piece of research and start to conduct interviews, start to do my own work around what is it that I learned as an executive, as a former executive that's been transitioning across to ultimately 7 industries in 5 countries. What are some of the learnings and what are some of the mistakes that I have made and I have observed others to make? And that was kind of the origin story of how I ended up writing this wonderful book. And allow me also by saying that I know this is an audio show, so we won't have the luxury of showing slides. But when I present this topic, I usually start the presentation with something like, my name is Navid Nazemian, and I am on a mission. And my mission is to help as many executive leaders and the organizations and the boards to succeed and avoid, making the biggest mistakes and do really what actually works in the real work of executive transitions.
Wow. Fabulous. I love what you shared there. Give us a kind of a background about, these transitions now. I mean, there's so many changes at the executive level. And a lot of times, maybe somebody's been in a certain industry or, they've done something for a long time and never thought about maybe transitioning into something else that might be new but yet could still utilize those skills and experience. But maybe they're just, again, because of the fear of the unknown, they're not sure how to go about doing that. Or maybe they could be shortchanging themselves for future opportunities because of that thinking. What are some things that you could share that could help those executives maybe listening that might be, there right now?
Sure. So allow me, before we go into what actually works, to start to talk about a little bit about why is it so damn hard and what is the actual failure rate? I mean, again, when I started doing the research, I realized that 4 out of 10 executives do not make it, which really, really was hard for me to digest and believe. Now, the reality is that there are 5 independent studies. I'm only citing a few of those. Heidrick & Struggles, one of the largest search firms on this planet. McKinsey & Company, Harvard Business Review, Center for Creative Leadership and Development Dimensions International, DDI. They all come to the same number, which is 40%. Now, some differentiate between internal promotions, which is a little less likely to fail, and external hires, which is a little more risky. But the reality is the 40% holds true, which brings us to the key question as to how can this be? I mean, I worked in the human resources function. I know how much energy, time, and effort goes into those senior appointments. I mean, my goodness, Chris, when I was hiring CFOs or CEOs, I mean, the amount of work that went into a single hire was beyond belief. This starts usually with hiring an external search firm, such as a Heidrick & Struggles, Russell Reynolds, Spencer, one of the large firms, or a boutique firm, depending on the niche. And then they do their own assessments, background checks, speaking to former line managers, speaking to former direct reports, speaking to former HR leaders of the same organization that the organization has hired that executive for. And despite all of that, and despite the multiple interviews in the hiring organization, 4 out of 10 don't make it. Now, let's go back and unpack this a little more. The first thing that gets in the way is simply because a single appointment is usually a stacking of multiple executive transition challenges coming your way. Now, I would like to use my own little example here. So I was the European HR director working for a fast-moving consumer goods company. And I was the regional HRD for the R&D unit of that particular business, called BAT, by the way. And I was based in Germany. And my responsibility was to look after the HR delivery and the strategy of the HR function in an 8 European country footprint. Full stop. Then I got my big promotion. So I was headhunted to go and join another company called Roche, which is a pharmaceutical company, one of the top 5 pharmaceutical companies in the world. And I became the global head of HR. Now, the reality is my responsibility grew from an 8 country footprint in a very similar time zone to a 140 country footprint. None of those time zones really aligned. So I was faced with 5 executive transition challenges at the same time. I joined a new organization, and I'm sure you know, it's like marrying someone new. You have to adjust to their ways of working, understand the culture, understand what a great leader looks like in this company, and so on. I also faced my big promotion challenge. Again, as a matter of fact, this was the first global role that I was hired into, and I had never done a global role before. So that was a big, big promotion for me. The third challenge that I was faced with was what Michael Watkins, the author of The First 90 Days, kindly calls the corporate diplomacy challenge, which I like to call, as someone who grew up in Germany, the politics challenge, right? I mean, every time you move into the global head office of a large global organization, expect politics to come your way, whether you like it or not, and whether the organization actually likes to admit that this thing called politics exists in their culture or not. And that came with another challenge for me, which was the international move challenge. Now, again, some people might challenge me and say, hang on, you moved from Bayreuth in Germany to the German-speaking part of Switzerland called Basel. The reality is, Chris, if you were to move from London to New York, or heck, for that matter, from New York to Austin, Texas, although technically this is all English-speaking places, the reality is that the culture that you will be faced with is going to be challenging and different than the one that you have been, learning to accustom yourself to. And last but not least, what I faced as part of that executive kind of transition at the same time was the fact that I stepped into a newly created role, a role that did not exist before the company hired me into, which meant that every single day I was walking over landmines without even realizing them, because whatever was written up in my job description was somebody else's, beloved child. And of course, they never would want to let go of that beloved child. And so although technically I was in charge and everybody had on the surface level agreed that I will now look after this one child here, one child here, one child here, they really didn't want to let go of those. And guess what? All the unwanted children that were not part of my remit were handed over very easily to me at the same time. So this is why, and one of the reasons why it's so damn hard to land, because one appointment will lead into a multiple challenges coming your way. And so that is one of the reasons why 4 out of 10 don't make it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And that was really, because sometimes you gotta hear that. Those are hard facts that you shared. And I know I'm looking forward to hearing what you're going to share in the second half here. As we get toward, we're about 3.5 minutes to our first break, Navid. With what you shared here, with those that are listening, like whether if you're an executive or you're on track to be an executive at that certain level, what are some of the things that, again, you would give advice that, to kind of be more proactive rather than reactive with transitions? Because again, there's mergers, there's acquisitions, exit strategy, anything could happen at any given moment. And we have to be proactive to make these, to adapt and make these changes. What would that look like when you're sharing to someone up front?
Sure. So the first quote I would like to share here is from a gentleman called Nassim Taleb. And he said once, invest in preparedness, not in prediction, which I think is absolutely true and holds true when you think of the topic. So one of the very first things that the executives can do is to make sure that they work with someone like myself. And I'm not the only one out there. There are many, many other amazing coaches out there who have specialized in this niche, who really can support them with whatever is going to come their way. Now, there is a reason why roughly half of the executives that choose to work with me are self-paying clients, and the other half are sponsored by the organization. And this is kind of going back to the smartness of the leader to realize that, hey, I got a 60-40 chance of succeeding here. I want to increase my odds of success by investing in dedicated, qualified, and professional support. And that is just one of the many interventions, of which I share 12 in my book, that executives can start to think and consider investing in. And if the executive has some leverage with the organization, I have worked with many incredible organizations that are happy to invest in that particular process because they know that hiring the best exec and letting them run or swim or sink is probably not the best strategy. So there are proven methods that are going to help to set the executive up for success. And that's just going to be one of those that I would like to share with you and your listeners.
Professional development. I love that. And when you look at professional development, and this is something that, again, it doesn't have to be something but with the frequency of addressing that on a more frequent basis, like dripping it to them, probably be the best approach then, and just kind of like, hey, they go through maybe a workshop for a half day, full day type of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, my signature year-long transition program starts in month 0 and finishes after months 12. And in those 12 months, we have anywhere between 10 to 20 sessions, which means roughly 1 a month or 2 a month, depending on the level of investment of the executive and or the organization. And so there is cadence that we have to get into. Think of this as working with a personal trainer, right?
Yeah.
And if you're completely out of shape, heck, at the outset, you may want to front load the engagement. You might want to meet up with your PT twice a week just to get into a habit and routine. And as and when you make progress, you may want to scale down the intensity of your intervention with your PT and move down to once a month or once every other week.
Wow. Powerful stuff that you shared. And I agree. I always find that, when it's spread over time, it becomes more stickable, and people tend to be more accountable, when it comes to, now taking that and actually, putting it to use and getting the most out of that. And I'm looking forward to later here in the show where you'll be able to share with the listeners, more information and how they can learn more about that and what you do with executives in that particular area. We hope everybody is getting value. We've only touched a tip of the iceberg. We're going to have to go to break here soon. But when we come right back, Navid is going to be sharing some more great information here when it comes to, mastering executive transitions. Again, this is just such an important area, especially in the world that we live in with all the changes that are around us. So again, it's better to be proactive rather than reactive, and locking arms with somebody like Navid who could help you based upon his experience in this particular area. We got to go to break, everybody, but we'll be right back.
What is balance? It's being true to your purpose and not being distracted by shiny objects, surrounding yourself with family and loved ones, nurturing your spirituality, maintaining healthy balance of emotional and physical wellness, and being present in the moment. Chris Salem creates awareness about unblocking mindset barriers for sales professionals, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and all types of people to have sustainable success at the next level. The solution evolves out of the problem or challenge. The issue is that many people and businesses manage the effect but do not address the root cause. You now have an opportunity to live your life and operate your business in the solution rather than the effect of your challenges. Schedule a time to chat about your goals and the person you desire to be by going to ChristopherSalem.com. We have group consulting calls, one-on-one, and other programs to assist you. It will be the best thing you do for yourself to see how sustainable success is possible for you in your life and business. Join us at the next level. Visit ChristopherSalem.com.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are listening to Sustainable Success with Chris Salem. Send an email to Chris at ChristopherSalem.com. Now, back to Sustainable Success.
Welcome back to Sustainable Success. If you're just joining us, we're talking about mastering executive transitions. Again, for you executives or those that are aspiring to be at that level, this is a show for you. We are with the subject matter expert, Navid Nazemian. He is an executive transition coach. Again, we encourage you to check out his full bio here on the show site here at Libsyn. Just a wealth of knowledge, and we encourage you to listen to the first segment of this show where he provided a lot of great insight on the importance of being proactive in this particular area, especially with the times that we live in. Now, but if you could share with us some, insights to some of the other interventions when it comes to executive transitions.
Sure. I love the fact that you want to go right in the heart of the gold mine, Chris. So I'm hoping that your listeners are going to get real value from this part. So I already gave away one of the interventions, but let me start by saying that, when I think of executive transitions, and I've just signed up a new client that's keen to get into this work with me. The name is LVMH, or Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, and they have 75 maisons, as they call them. So 75 brands that they hone in creative luxury and all sorts of different businesses. But, just to mention a few names, Dior, Tiffany, and Louis Vuitton are just some of those names. So when I sit down with them and talk about this subject, I say, please, 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 always think of the golden thread, meaning it takes 3 sets of different stakeholders to really make sure that the success rate of the executive is maximized and the so-called derailment risk is reduced. Now, the reality is we will never be able to reduce that to zero. That being said, like an investment manager or a portfolio manager, there are ways where we can reduce the downside risk quite substantially. And so the 3 stakeholders are the executive itself, right? He or she can do certain things that are more helpful than not doing anything and just hoping for the best. The second key stakeholder oftentimes is the HR person. It can be the CHRO, it can be the talent director, it can be whoever is in charge of this particular process. And I've made it a fun exercise of mine. Every time I meet a CHRO, I ask them, who's actually in charge of the executive transition process? And mind you, most organizations don't have a process for those level leadership. And so they have a fantastic onboarding program, as all of my companies did, right? The 5 companies I mentioned to you, they all have a beautiful, beautiful program. That's an onboarding program for everyone. The reality is, again, if it's catered and perfected for everyone, it will be nowhere near sufficient or appropriate for the top exco level leadership. And so that's the second stakeholder. So whoever's in charge of the process, typically the HR department or person, they need to play a role in this. And third, and this is the most underrated aspect, I'm actually going to do a webinar on this with an organization called Board Owl in a month from now. The board must have a key stake in this. Imagine, I'm going to throw a name out there, Boeing, right? How many failed CEO transitions can you afford before you have to fire the chairman, right? And so it's a real thing in that when we think, it's fashionable these days to speak and talk and report on ESG, environmental sustainability goals. The S in the ESG, this is paying a dividend on the S, right? If you have churn at the very top again and again, and by churn, I mean not a planned succession, not a planned retirement, people coming failing and then being replaced by another leader that fails, and so on and so forth. So that's just the first intervention, which is, again, I like to think of it as the golden thread.
Yeah.
The second intervention is to really make sure to focus on what I call the 5 C's. Now, if this was a quiz and I would ask your listeners, what are the 5 C's that make an outstanding diamond? The 5 C's are carat, weight, color, clarity, cut, and certification. And if I were to ask the same question around, what are the 5 C's that give any executive a leg up when they are going through a transition? The 5 C's are context, the first C, arguably the most important C of all, because it looks at the circumstance of the organization, at the competition landscape, governmental, societal, and all the other good things. The second C stands for culture, whether it's the organization culture, it's the leadership culture, or it's the values that have made this company the successful company it is today. The third C looks at commitment. What is this organization committed to achieving for its customers, clients, and society? The fourth C touches upon circles. And by that, I mean circles of influence, circles of power, and quite frankly, informal decision making. It's not always true that the most senior person on the org chart calls the shots. Sometimes it's a subject matter expert that's 2 or 3 layers down from the top of the house that really will make or break a big ERP implementation or a big investment decision because they really understand what they're talking about. And last but not least, the fifth of the 5 C's speaks of confidence. These are the levels of employee engagement. This is the leadership DNA that's embedded in the organization. And the reason I am suggesting to focus on the 5 C's with the executive, by the way, is twofold. The first thing is, Chris, we all inherently would like to continue to do what's made us successful. And the reality is, as and when we step up into the C-suite, especially for the very first time, it's unlikely that whatever has been making us successful is going to serve us well, which is the moment when the coach sits down with the exec and says, imagine you were my client. I would give you an explanation of the 5 C's. And your homework before we meet up next time would be to reflect on how the 5 C's in your new role are different than the 5 C's that have made you successful so far. And that's the moment of reflection. That's when you are going to, start to embed yourself more successfully in the new role. So that's the 5 C's. The third intervention, and I already gave it away by saying, make sure you work with someone who is a professional in this field, really looks at what I call break-even time, right? Again, if you imagine Walt Disney, if they were to hire an intern, and they had a failed group CEO transition at the very top. So Bob Chapek is the name of the gentleman who barely lasted 10 months in the role, although he had worked for Walt Disney for 26 years. He and other people in his situation will likely take roughly 6 months to start to understand what this role is all about and start to give value back to the organization. And so working with an executive transition coach, and this is not just my pitch here, but it's proven by Russell Reynolds, Michael Watkins, Byford, and others, would reduce that, time by 50% or more. So imagine if you're the group CEO of a company such as Walt Disney, if you were able to transition and start giving value already after 3 months, then 6 months, what would it be worth to you and to your shareholders as an organization?
Yeah.
The fourth intervention looks at what are the onboarding activities that the organization has put in place. Again, this is my favorite question when I meet CHROs. By the way, can you walk me through your executive onboarding process? And then there is usually a bit of a silence. Why? Because the top 3 activities that are done across the board for any employee in the firm are getting the admin stuff right, offering some sort of a business orientation induction, either a day or a half a day, and making sure that the legal and procedural formalities are in place. If you have to conduct background checks, you have, tick the box. If you have to check whatever, you have done that. But when we start to move, and by the way, 8 to 9 out of 10 companies get those basics right. But when we start to move into higher value activities that actually would work for the executive level leadership, there are very few organizations who actually get those things right. The first one is aligning expectations with teams and bosses. Right? Super important because yes, there was a search brief. You got some interview, input as an incoming exec. But the reality is you really have to get this right. And only 1 out of 2 companies get this right. The second topic is organizing meaningful meetings with key stakeholders, which assumes you as the organization have mapped your stakeholder universe as per the executive role in your company. So let's say, Chris, if you were the incoming CFO at LVMH, there is someone in HR who sit down and done the thinking on your behalf to say, okay, Chris, your unique stakeholder universe landscape looks like this. You have to obviously work with your boss, who is the CEO. You may have 2 key members of the board that will be on your toes all the time. One of them is the, chair of the whatever audit and risk committee, and the other person is the chair of the remuneration committee, let's say. Then you have a set of peers that you obviously need to make sure that you take them on board. And by the way, because we are in the state of California, and the state of California has got a very complicated matrix of all the fiduciary liabilities they expect CFOs to hold on to. You also have this person here in the government, you have this key stakeholder here, you have the big 4. So you really know what you're walking into. And last but not least, and this is one of the top 3 reasons, group reasons for executive transition failure, is to facilitate cultural familiarization, especially for those that are hired from the outside. It's not uncommon, and Hewlett Packard is an example I can share, where they hired externally someone who came from SAP. And all they did was, instead of listening to what is working and what may need to change, to try to hammer down the message that, in my previous company, everything was so much more great than in this, place here. And of course, you will start to lose the support of the wider population. And eventually it will dawn upon the board that you may not be the best hire. And so it's those 3, what I call higher value activities, that are very rarely, done right by most organizations.
Wow, I love what you just shared there. And why do you feel like they're not done right? Is just a lack of awareness, lack of knowledge? What would that be from what you've seen, Navid?
It's multiple reasons. One is somehow there is this inherent belief, especially if you go through some of the more established search firms or headhunters, that as long as you pay a decent amount of money and make sure that all the credentials are double checked and triple checked, that essentially guarantees the executive and you a high degree of success. And as we know, there's a 60-40 chance to get that right. And so there is this belief that, if you were to hire the brightest and smartest, they are likely to succeed. And as we know, 6 out of 10 times that works about right. The second reason is that if you were just to listen to what I shared with the higher value activities, it takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of time. And by the way, it takes a little bit of support, both from the group CEO and from the board and whoever's the HR, the most senior HR person. And so it really, and it's not, I'm not talking about, hundreds of people and so on, but it probably needs a fifth of a full-time equivalent person to really sit down and update these things on a regular basis. I give you a funny example. In one of my companies, I won't mention the name, when I was the incoming HR exec, I had a few meetings line up in the first 2 weeks of my appointment. And after those, and I couldn't quite make sense of what is the reason for these sets of appointments. And after the 2 weeks, I actually went back to my executive assistant and asked her and said, can you help me understand who came up with the idea to put these appointments into my diary as part of my executive onboarding? And she turned around and said, I did that. Now, with all due respect, right, an executive admin is probably very good at admin activities, but a strategic matter such as mapping the stakeholder universe, internally and externally, is a little bit of an over ask or an overkill for even the best EA in the world. And so, of course, they can give input into that. But the reality is you need someone who has a 360 view of the organization and the key stakeholders and competitors and everyone else that's important to really be able to give guidance as to, okay, if you have an incoming CHRO, he or she must be meeting as a minimum with these 10 or 12 stakeholders. And it should happen in that follow and in that order, because it's more important to cover internal stakeholders, maybe internally, than initially moving to key suppliers, key customers, key accounts, and governmental, employees, and so on.
Wow. Powerful. Love it. Love what you shared. And if you could share, I mean, we got about less than 2 minutes before the break. So I'm going to make sure we get into some new stuff in the third segment. Anything that you want to add or sum up what you shared with those interventions here?
Yeah, I mean, maybe one more aspect, which is why, again, I do not want to belittle the idea of the first 90 days, but it's such a big myth and it's so hard to kill it for the executive leaders. When I speak about an executive appropriate transition framework, I call it the double diamond framework that I give to the world in my book. It consists of 7 phases, of which only one is the first 90 days. So again, what I want to share here with the listeners is the fact that a first 90-day approach is nowhere near sufficient for anyone at the executive level to onboard and transition most successfully. It takes a lot more work and a lot more thinking than here's your 90-day plan. You can sit on your hands, start on day 1, and you will be done after 3 months. No, it takes a lot more effort and energy, quite frankly, to make it.
Yeah. Wow. Great stuff. And, I know we got just about a minute left here. In the next segment, I know you're going to go into a little bit more length in here. Just anything else before we go to break that you can kind of just tie it together for what you shared.
There is another gentleman who I admire. His name is Michael Burrows, and he wrote a very amazing book called Before Onboarding, which unfortunately didn't get quite the level of success that the first 90 days got. But again, it's beyond me why any executive must sit on their hands and wait until day 1 to start to onboard themselves successfully. So there are critical things that any executive can do before they actually start in their role on day 1.
Got it. Wow. Powerful stuff. I'm hoping everybody is taking notes. Again, we highly encourage you to share this with any executives that are in your network or any joint alliance partners. This is a great insights, and we got more to come here with Navid in this particular area. And again, you're going to get an opportunity to find out how to get in contact with him to get some more information that you can discuss that to your specific requirements here a little bit later here in the show. Well, everybody, we're going to have to go to break. When we come right back, we got more with Mastering Executive Transitions, and we'll be right back.
What is balance? It's being true to your purpose and not being distracted by shiny objects, surrounding yourself with family and loved ones, nurturing your spirituality, maintaining healthy balance of emotional and physical wellness, and being present in the moment. Chris Salem creates awareness about unblocking mindset barriers for sales professionals, business leaders, entrepreneurs, and all types of people to have sustainable success at the next level. The solution evolves out of the problem or challenge. The issue is that many people and businesses manage the effect but do not address the root cause. You now have an opportunity to live your life and operate your business in the solution rather than the effect of your challenges. Schedule a time to chat about your goals and the person you desire to be by going to ChristopherSalem.com. We have group consulting calls, one-on-one, and other programs to assist you. It will be the best thing you do for yourself to see how sustainable success is possible for you in your life and business. Join us at the next level. Visit ChristopherSalem.com. Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today. You are listening to Sustainable Success with Chris Salem. Send an email to Chris at ChristopherSalem.com. Now, back to Sustainable Success.
Welcome back to Sustainable Success. Our show is being brought to you today by Alumni Direct. Alumni Direct is a new social media community platform dedicated to bringing alumni together from all different generational types and an opportunity to meet new people for the first time. Now, it also features a new professional athletes corner. Yes, for those professional athletes that are looking to transition into everyday life, maybe perhaps a new job, a new career, buying a business, a franchise, whatever that may be. Well, guess what? You don't have to do it alone. Now you can do it with the help of forming groups with other professional athletes that are on the same journey as you to make that transition more smooth for yourself. So if you'd like some more information about Alumni Direct, they also have a podcast called From Athletes to Entrepreneurs, which airs weekly. And if you'd like more information about both of those sections for professional athletes, feel free to check them out at alumnidirect.com. That's alumnidirect.com. Navid, just some wonderful insights that you're sharing here in this important area, especially with all the change happening. You know, when you had published the book, Mastering Executive Transitions, the definitive guide, and, you know, all these great things that, you know, you researched and what you put into that, what is one thing that you saw after everything, you know, kind of was out there and you were out there, you know, getting the book out there, you're out there working with executives, speaking on this particular area that just kind of hit where, that I could change my view on something, or something changed in itself that might perhaps now be included in book 2 or the follow-up to Mastering Executive Transitions?
Such a powerful question, Chris. And, allow me by saying I'm a bit of a research nerd. So this is a little secret just between you and me. And so my book actually includes 156 citations. The appendix is 22 pages long. And if I wouldn't get very formally, legally worded letters from my publisher threatening me with a lawsuit, I would probably still be in the research phase of my book, and I still would enjoy, reading the different studies. But coming back to your question, the one thing I actually had to change my mind is to reflect the extent of key stakeholders onboarding support. So what I thought of this topic before doing the research was as follows. I would assume that the critical stakeholder groups are equally important to an incoming exec. That will be my baseline assumption. So whether, for instance, if I look at the peers, I look at the line manager, and I look at the direct reports, I would actually throw them all in the same pot and think, well, they're all important. And this is why the executive must give enough energy and attention to each of these segments of stakeholders. Now, the reality is, and this is based upon research, so this is a joint study that was conducted by Genesis and Egon Zehnder, another reputable search firm out there. They found out that arguably the biggest and most important stakeholder are the direct reports and your line manager. I think undoubtedly these are very important segments. Why? You are even if you're the group CEO, you're unlikely to get much done without anyone else, right? So your team matters. And at the same time, you want to have the backing, support, and endorsement of your line manager. So these two are no-brainers. Take. What really surprised me were two other stakeholder groups. The first one was the peers, meaning the research found that the peers are actually not at all important to the onboarding success of an incoming exec. And allow me by explaining that. So let's say you're the incoming CTO, right? Microsoft just hired you as the incoming chief technology officer. The reality is, if you were to exclude the HR person, nobody really has your onboarding support as their mission critical success, right? It's in nobody's scorecard. It's in nobody's job description, and nobody really should feel responsible for that. Now, the research is not suggesting ignore your other peers. What it is suggesting is that when it comes to your onboarding success as an executive, do not bother time with your peers because they are, quite frankly, busy doing other things. So that's one of the two surprises I found with this study that I had to change my mind on. The second one, and I feel a little ashamed by saying this, is the support of the HR partner. So whether it's a CHRO or talent director or a divisional HRD. 16% of the respondents said this is to a very great extent important as a stakeholder group or a person to take care of. And another 16% said this is not important at all, which is an interesting phenomenon. And the way I make sense of this study is it comes back to the quality of the HR person that you will be inheriting, right? If you have a credible, great-minded, super partner-driven HR person, they will be very much important to your success. And if you have a paper-pushing, admin-focused, couldn't care less about the strategic stuff kind of an HR person that you have unfortunately inherited, guess what? Don't lose your time with them and don't listen to their advice. So these are just two things that I had to change my mind on before doing the research and after doing the research. And I was lucky enough that I could just about squeeze it into the book.
Wow. Well, I always like I love the transparency and honesty because, hey, things change, right? And things nowadays change at lightning speed. So sometimes when we put something out, something can change and we have to adapt. With that change, like what are some of the things that, when you bring to, coaching an executive, in this area, like, again, it's not going to always be one size fits all the time. So like how you would go about, like how you were able to see that and adapt and make those observations. How do you apply that with also when you're working with an executive chairman?
Wow, I love it, Chris. You're not only digging into the gold mine, you want just to carry those big pieces of gold out of the mine. Okay, let's do it. So, and again, I appreciate this is not a visual presentation, but imagine this is a study that was done by DDI. This is Development Dimension International, one of my favorite research organizations, similar to Center for Creative Leadership and Harvard Business Review. What I love about them is that obviously they do proper research. That's the first thing. That's a tick in the box. But the reality is what I really like about them is they run these kind of studies with tens of thousands of executives. I mean, this particular study is based upon 29,000 leaders giving the feedback. So it's really it's worth its weight in gold, in my opinion, because you can really trust upon that and not if they just interviewed Chris and Navid for sake of example. And based on our two people's opinion, they create a study. Now, imagine this to be, and I would like to go back. If you were my coaching client, and imagine you have just been appointed CEO of Coca-Cola, just for the sake of that argument. Now, if I wanted to go back and use my own example to get you into the reflective space that I want to get you, I would show this visual to you. Essentially, what it is 3 half circles that are colored differently. And the colors reflect skills and activities. Now, if I use my very own example from my most recent role that I worked at, I was the global head of HR working for a telecommunication company called Vodafone. And because you're based in the US, it's unlikely that anyone would know what Vodafone is. But at one point, Vodafone owned 40% of the shares of Verizon Wireless. Verizon will be a name to you. Now, telecommunication, that's the bread and butter business. In my role, I was not the CHRO, right? So she was higher up from where I was. In my role, I would roughly spend 2/3 of my total time. This is colored in orange and yellow. And the code for orange is getting work done through others. And the yellow part is engaging and inspiring employees. So in my role as a global head of HR, I partnered with our group CFO. I looked after 27,000 employees of the 100,000 employees we had in the total company in 24 markets. That was my remit. Now, that also means that roughly speaking, I spent 2/3 of my time getting work done through others, which means I was a manager of managers. I couldn't possibly take the emails from 27,000 employees. I'm appreciating that. And so I had a team that had a team that had a team. And boy, I say that's with all due respect, if you work with the finance function as an HR leader, you have to do a lot of engagement, inspiring of the employees. Now, those two activities roughly took up 2/3 of my time. Now, imagine if that same organization, and they didn't, but if they were to promote me into the global CHRO position. So I would move up one level, and I would partner with the group CEO, and I would look after the entire 100,000 employees across the same 24 markets. Now, that same line, suddenly you have to take your glasses to find the orange and yellow part because they are almost becoming insignificant. What is replacing those 2/3 of my time that's spent on the skills and activities suddenly is spent on managing high-risk decisions, right? Do we go for SAP or do we bring in Oracle? I mean, it's essentially a this or that kind of a decision. But that one decision can cost me my job, right? The second part of the 2/3 now is navigating organizational politics, although let's agree that nobody likes to admit that this thing exists in their company. And the third one is representing the corporate line, always, even as a private person. Imagine if you were this very important CEO and you would have a private dinner at a restaurant somewhere in New York City, and you would have an outburst at another guest. You will never be a private person if you're that high up on the organizational hierarchy. So you see suddenly how what actually got me the promotion to become CHRO has suddenly turned into insignificance. And that's being replaced by 3 new skills and activities that I now need to pay attention to. Yeah. Now, for you, in an executive coaching session, this would now be your point to sit down and reflect with me on what are the new mix of skills and activities that I need to pay attention to that may or may not be the same mix of skills and activities that actually got me the promotion into this position. So that's just one of the many wonderful tools that we use as transition coaches.
So you like to adapt, but you're adapting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, keep going. Sorry, Navid. I just wanted to.
Yeah, that's all. That's
what stood out when I heard that.
Yeah. It's one of the tools that I would use in a session with a coaching client, especially if they're new into a position.
Wow. Well, that's fabulous. And again, anybody that's listening to this, if this doesn't pertain to you right now, but it could pertain, make sure they listen to this show, especially for this particular part of the show here in the third segment. But we would encourage everyone to listen to this show in its entirety. I know we're getting near the end of the show now, but I want to thank you personally for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here today, here with Sustainable Success. We are so grateful for you and all the wonderful insights that you shared today. I want to make sure the audience has a chance to get to know you better by reaching out to you. Where can they find you? What are you up to? And anything that you'd like to share or provide the audience.
Sure. So first off, anyone that wants to find me can find me on LinkedIn. That is my only real social media platform that I entertain myself. I do not use a virtual assistant or anyone like that. I'm generally speaking very friendly, and I actually respond to every single message I get. So make sure that, if you're listening to this, you like what you hear, to connect with me. Don't just follow with me, but send me a connection invite. The second place I would like the listeners to invite into is my book landing page. Unsurprisingly, it's www.masteringexecutive-transitions.com. And if you hit on the newsletter button, you will have the opportunity to enter your email and be part of an executive newsletter that currently has got over 9,000 executive subscribers. It's a free newsletter. What I do is I continue to read, digest, and share the one study that I find to be outstanding every week with you. Some of my readers say, this is the only thought leadership newsletter that I'm going to read because I know that I have everything covered in just this one newsletter. So those are just two ways to get in touch with me.
Great. Fabulous. Well, we're going to make sure that all those links, even for the book and everything, including the newsletter, we'll make sure to have that in the show notes that you can find here for this show on Libsyn as well. So we highly encourage everybody, make sure you subscribe from the Libsyn platform. You could also listen to it on Apple, Spotify, and then, of course, our YouTube version as well. It's just audio on YouTube, not the video, but you will get the audio. So again, in 15 seconds, 20 seconds, Navid, anything you'd like to just last word share with the audience? Wonderful presentation.
I love to give value, Chris, and allow me to share two gifts to any one of these listeners of yours that come and hit me up on LinkedIn, and they have to send me just a message. The first one is I'm going to share with them my top 10 criteria for selecting a coach that's right for you. And the second, giveaway for your listeners is a free sample of my book that includes a full chapter and some more information about the book. That's going to be my gift to you and to your listeners.
Beautiful. Thank you so much again, Navid, for being here. We thank you so much here from all of us here at Sustainable Success. And listeners, we want to thank you each and every week joining us here at Sustainable Success. Again, we are committed to bringing in subject matter experts like Navid in each and every week to help elevate you and your business to the next level. Till then, everybody, have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Thursday at the same time. Take care.
Thank you for tuning into Sustainable Success. Be sure to join Chris Salem and his guests every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Time and 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Channel. Have an incredible week.